I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents. On this World AIDS Day, we'll look at what the Church is doing to fight the deadly disease in Africa.
The Catholic Church has a long story of presence in Africa that goes back to many centuries.
And a closer look at what the Pope had to say about AIDS and condoms. Plus, a story from the 16th century gets a modern twist. It's an opera about Our Lady of Guadalupe. Well, good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. Francesca Maxime has the night off. Well, today is World AIDS Day. It's the day set aside to call attention to an epidemic that claimed the lives of 1.8 million people just last year alone. In all, more than 33 million people worldwide are living with HIV and AIDS. Sub-Saharan Africa is home to more than 2/3 of them. Well, Pope Benedict's recent statements on the morality of condom use to prevent the spread of disease put the spotlight back on the AIDS crisis, especially in Africa. Critics say the Catholic Church is not doing enough to curb the epidemic, but at least one group that devotes its work to AIDS patients disagrees.
I think that the Catholic Church has a long story of presence in Africa that goes back to many centuries. So I think that it has been present and at the side of the people with the plight of AIDS in Africa since the very beginning.
Paola Piscitelli is president of the community of Sant'Egidio in the U.S. The community began in 1968, just after the Second Vatican Council. Piscitelli says the group builds communities around the world with a special emphasis on helping the poor.
We recreate communities throughout the places where we live, now in more than 60 countries in the world, and we take care of one another as a family.
Sant'Egidio has a strong presence in Africa, especially in the nation of Mozambique, where members helped negotiate a peace deal in 1992, ending a bloody decade-long civil war.
We realized that there was a plight that was affecting and killing people more than the war. So that's why we started to realize that there was something else that needed to be done, that we couldn't just leave the country and abandon them to this horrible disease.
Enter the DREAM, or Drug Resource Enhancement Against AIDS and Malnutrition program. The Sant'Egidio community launched DREAM in 2002 based on a holistic approach to AIDS treatment. Piscitelli says they focus on medical treatment and education.
When we started, we didn't know where to look, so you have to also to choose an aspect that you want to treat. And so we focused on the treatment of mothers, because we thought that the role of women in the African society is very important. And in the family, in the African family, the woman is really at the center. If you don't have a mother, you have a double problem, because you have also orphans. So to treat a mother means also to allow children to have a mother. Women has been particularly affected by the disease, because I think they are certainly object of abuse and violence.
But critics of the Catholic Church say its teaching banning condom use is dangerous, and they say the Church too often casts moral judgment on actions that lead to the spread of AIDS.
I haven't heard word of condemnation for the people, and I think the Catholic Church in this sense has been consistent. Pope Benedict has expressed his concern for Africa several times, and I think it's very dear to him, and he has it in the center of his heart.
So where does she hope things go from here? Piscitelli says the Church and the world have to be in it for the long haul.
When you enter a relationship, usually you cannot say I'm with you for 2 months or 3 months or so on. I think that as human beings, we should be open to be one at the side of the other for a long time. And that's, I think, what is also our commitment to Africa should be open-ended, hoping that, we can walk together, in the sense that we have not only to walk, and I don't think we should walk for them, but we could be able to walk together. So that's, in a way, it's my hope.
Well, there is more on the AIDS crisis over on our website. Just go to currentsny.net. Well, stay with us. We'll have the day's headlines coming up, including more from the Pentagon's report on Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure. Coming up in just a bit, modern music tells a popular sacred tale. But first, let's have a look at the day's headlines. We're getting more details on the Pentagon's report on a possible repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. According to the report, repealing the ban on openly homosexual service members would not require anyone to change their personal or religious views. But soldiers would be required to respect and serve with people who hold different views from their own. The report also says that a repeal would not force chaplains to act in a way that was inconsistent with their beliefs, but they would still need to care for all service members. Well, elsewhere in Washington, U.S. bishops are urging the Senate to ratify the START treaty, which would reduce by 30% the nuclear arsenals of the U.S. and Russia. President Obama and Russian President Dmitry Medvedev have already signed the treaty. Albany Bishop Howard Hubbard says the concern arises from the church's commitment to the sanctity of human life. Hubbard chairs the Bishops' Committee on International Justice and Peace. Leaders from Christian, Jewish, and Islamic faiths are calling on Congress to approve the DREAM Act. Meantime, the bill would allow undocumented youth who meet certain criteria to become American citizens. At least one young man in Florida is helping lead the charge to see the DREAM Act become a reality. We get more from Richard Jordan.
I'm part of the American dream.
19-year-old Mian Spinelli isn't exactly comfortable in the spotlight, but he's showing he can step up to help change U.S. immigration law. A few weeks ago, the Argentinian student at St. Thomas University was in Maine for a soccer match when he was pulled over by police.
We were speeding, and that was the main reason for that.
Spinelli threatened with deportation because he doesn't have immigration documents. The thought he'd be sent back to Argentina upsetting for the university.
Our reaction as a community was similar to that of a death on campus.
But the school, along with South Florida's Catholic Church, got behind Spinelli, a university attorney helping him to get a stay of deportation. Now Spinelli using his experience to pressure Congress to pass the DREAM Act. The legislation would allow college students who came to this country without the proper papers to stay.
It's not about me anymore. I mean, I want to help in this case. It's about all the students that are affected by the DREAM Act.
To deny these young neighbors of ours a future is a tremendous waste of human talent and potential.
Education, not deportation. Education, not deportation.
Spinelli, with the support of his college classmates, unexpectedly becoming a poster child for the American dream.
Hopefully the DREAM Act will pass and I get to finish my education, get to work in the United States and keep on pursuing my dream.
Richard Jordan reporting there, and Spinelli can legally stay in the U.S. until June 2011 when he's scheduled to graduate. Well, from Oklahoma, an amendment banning judges from consulting Sharia law or the sacred law of Islam has been blocked from taking effect. A district judge issued a preliminary injunction ruling that the amendment fosters an excessive government entanglement with religion. Oklahoma's election board has voted to appeal the judge's decision. Well, more updates on the bombshell release of confidential State Department documents by the website WikiLeaks. There are reports that 852 of the still-to-be-published documents involve the Vatican. The founder of WikiLeaks will publish those and other documents incrementally over the next few weeks. In an interview with London's The Telegraph, he did not go into details about the documents concerning the Vatican. And from the Vatican now, Pope Benedict is calling for religious freedom for Catholics in China. The Pope made the appeal during his weekly general audience with a group of Catholics from the mainland of China in the front rows.
Raccomando alle preghiere vostre e dei cattolici di tutto il mondo la Chiesa in Cina, che come sapete sta vivendo momenti particolarmente difficili. Chiediamo alla Beata Vergine Maria aiuto dei cristiani di sostenere tutti i vescovi cinesi a me tanto cari, affinché testimonino la loro fede con coraggio, riponendo ogni speranza nel Salvatore che attendiamo. Affidiamo inoltre alla Vergine tutti i cattolici di quell'amato Paese, perché con la sua intercessione possano realizzare un'autentica esistenza cristiana in comunione con la Chiesa universale, contribuendo così anche all'armonia e al bene comune del loro nobile popolo.
The Pope made no reference to a Chinese bishop who was ordained last month without Vatican approval. Well, back here in New York, you know Christmas is right around the corner when you see this. It's the lighting of the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree, which this year is 74 feet tall. It comes from the backyard of a New York City firefighter. Thousands turned out for the ceremony despite the steady rain. Well, tonight begins the Festival of Lights. It's the Jewish celebration of Hanukkah. It commemorates a miraculous burning of temple lights for 8 days, despite having only enough oil for 1 day. Stay tuned, there's much more currents coming up. Just ahead, I talk with a former student of Pope Benedict about the Pope's controversial statements on condoms. Welcome back. Well, as we heard at the top of the show, the Catholic Church has been actively involved in caring for victims of AIDS, especially in Africa, where the epidemic is now having a devastating impact. Last month, a new book of interviews with Pope Benedict refocused attention on AIDS prevention and the Church's stance on the use of condoms. Some of what the Pope has said has sparked controversy and some confusion as well. Well, joining me now to talk about that and more is Father Joseph Fessio. He's the founder and editor of Ignatius Press, the primary English language publisher of Benedict's work. Father Fessio is also a former student of Joseph Ratzinger, who is now, of course, Pope Benedict. Father Fessio, thanks for joining us.
Sure, Matt. Glad to be here.
Well, on the phone from sunny San Francisco, a very different scene than we're seeing here today in New York. But we thank you for joining us. Now, of course, this book, a lot more has been talked about than just condoms, but that's kind of what the spotlight has been focused on ever since, even before the book came out. Kind of give me your take on what the Pope actually said in the book about condom use.
Well, he's got about 2 pages in the book on condom usage, referring to his remarks on his Africa trip a few years back. There's about 1.5 pages, which is kind of sets the background, gives the context. Then he makes a statement which is a bit ambiguous. And this statement, unfortunately, was published ahead of the book's release by L'Osservatore Romano without context. And in the statement, there's some ambiguity, and so the interviewer, Peter Zeewald, asked this question: are you saying then that the Catholic Church is actually not opposed in principle to the use of condoms? And the Pope clarified. He said it's never a moral solution. However, a person might have the intention of preventing disease, and that intention could be a first step towards responsibility. So what the Pope is saying is it's always wrong, it's immoral, but there may be a possible glimmer of conscience being awakened here that could be a path towards a more moral life. That's what he actually said. It's been widely misinterpreted. Beautifully today, the African bishops in Kenya, all of them together, signed a terrific statement saying, look, there's no change in teaching here. This is what we've always been teaching. Right. So there is a lot of confusion out there, and I can understand it because there are some ambiguities in what the Pope originally said. But he clarifies that in the book. So I, for one, do not think it's ambiguous. Right.
So is it kind of, we're hearing him say kind of it's a lesser of two evils sort of thing? Is that one way to look at it?
Well, the Pope didn't say that, but he could have said that, but he did not. But that causes confusion, too, because people have the impression that if it's a lesser of two evils, you can do it. But that's not true. You can endure an evil or tolerate a lesser evil, but you can never do something which is evil, greater or lesser. Right. I'll give you a brief example, Matt, which I used in a little article I wrote on this thing. Let's say you're in New York, you got muggers. Let's suppose their weapon of choice is an iron pipe, and they find out people are dying, and as they're mugging them, we don't have to kill them. We just have to stun them, so let's pad our pipes. Now they go and they stun people, they rob them, they're still mugging them. So it would not be true to say, oh, Pope approves mugging with padded pipes. No, it's still wrong, but putting the padding on is at least a sign that, well, they're trying to do less harm than otherwise would do. So that's maybe a step towards maybe having some moral consciousness. But that does not mean, because it's a lesser evil to use pads on your pipe, that it's something you can approve or justify.
Right. Were you surprised at all of the press that this one particular statement got, even as I mentioned before the book came out?
Well, I wasn't surprised because of the way things happened. The L'Osservatore released this thing a couple of days ahead of time, there was a planned release in which the whole context would be given and the possible misinterpretation would be avoided, obviated. But not only did the Servitori print just a small section which is out of context, but was also mistranslated. They used the word justify, justificati in Italian, as opposed to there's some basis for it, there's some reasons for this. And that made it seem as if the Pope was changing the teaching. So I'm not surprised that we had all the turmoil given the fact that the book was not presented as it was intended to be presented.
Right. And of course, this is a very timely discussion to be having today on World AIDS Day. What are your thoughts on that and kind of what the Catholic Church has done to help people who are living with HIV and AIDS and to help prevent the spread of the disease?
Well, there's no organization on the planet that has done more to help those who are suffering with AIDS and done more to help prevent this from happening by the only method which actually works, which is abstinence and continence in marriage. So I'm proud to be a Catholic when it comes to addressing this problem. And here in San Francisco, as there in New York, hey, the Missionaries of Charity have an AIDS center. They were the first ones, I think, to set one up. At least not the first. They were among the very beginning. So I think the Catholic Church's record in this is outstanding. And if people actually accepted Jesus and his church, the AIDS epidemic would stop immediately.
All right. Well, Father Fessio, we're just out of time, but thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Sure.
Well, we're going to bring viewers some more of our conversation about Pope Benedict's book tomorrow. We'll try to shed some light on some topics that have not gotten as much attention as the Pope's statement on condoms there in the book. But in the meantime, to our viewers at home, stay right where you are. There's more Currents straight ahead. When we return, a sacred story told with modern music.
It is remarkably well composed, thorny but well composed.
Well, finally tonight, something altogether different for the holidays. An opera based on the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe. That feast day isn't until December 12th, but the Metro Chamber Orchestra is presenting the opera this weekend at Our Lady of Guadalupe, the Brooklyn parish that has the same name as the opera. Well, yesterday I had a chance to sit down and talk about this unusual work with the orchestra's conductor, Philip Nuzzo. Phil, thanks so much for being here today. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. Tell
me a little bit, first of all, about this opera, about this work, and kind of the story behind it.
The opera was written by James DeMars in 2008, premiered in Arizona in 2008. The genesis of the work is that it was originally intended to be a requiem for those immigrants coming through the desert who died on their way in. As he got into the story more, he realized that the devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe, Mr. DeMars is non-Catholic, was so deep that he decided to write the opera on the events in December and the apparitions of Mary to Juan Diego.
Right. Now about the music itself, I understand, I mean, of course this is a contemporary work, so that being said, I mean, it's going to be a little bit different from maybe, you know, a Mozart opera or something like that. It's going to be something that might catch people a little by surprise when they go to hear it.
Absolutely. This is not. You're not going to leave here humming the tunes.
Right.
This is
no toe tappers in this.
That's exactly. Oh, there was one actually.
Oh, okay, all right.
There are 30 percussion instruments. None of them are traditional.
Wow.
You don't have traditional timpani, cymbal crashes, or bass drum. Wow. There were, I didn't realize there were 30 other percussion instruments. Conch shells, wind sounds. It clearly is a contemporary work. There are very thorny rhythms throughout the work. There's lots of polytonal effects. It's very, very interesting and rhythmically challenging because of the Mexican rhythms that are employed throughout, most especially with the chorus.
Yeah, yeah. And I heard you talking to Chris a little bit earlier. Chris, I saw is one of our producers here at Currents, and you were talking to him a little bit earlier and kind of compared it to a kind of a thorny Aaron Copland score or something like that. It's very difficult.
It's it's very much like a Copland symphony. as opposed to a Copeland tone poem, an Appalachian Spring or something like that. This has got its elements, it's got its barbaric elements, and clearly reflects both the peaceful nature of Juan Diego and the apparitions, and of course the hostile nature of both Bishop Zumarraga and the people themselves, who are still looking backwards at the Aztec gods.
Right. So why did you choose to perform this particular work?
This is really interesting. I belong to an opera listserv. When you're in the business, you want to see what's going on, and I got in the subject title said, Our Lady of Guadalupe. I thought it was a bride looking, oh yes, Phil, can you do Ave Maria at the wedding? What it was is the discussion about the opera. So I laughed. I says, this must be a joke.
Right.
Put it away. But it stayed in the back of my mind for 6 months. Finally, I went to the website. And then 6 months later, about a year, I went to Monsignor. I said, you know, I'm here at Our Lady of Guadalupe now for 2 years. I said, what about doing this opera? And he said, oh, have a good time. That was it.
And the rest, as they say, is history.
It will be.
Will be. Well, yeah, it's not quite history yet. Of course, we have a couple of performances coming up this weekend.
Right. Friday evening, December 3rd at 7:30, and Sunday, December 5th at 4.
Great, great. Well, wonderful. And of course, our cameras were there capturing a little bit of the rehearsal last night. And understand things went well. How's it all coming along?
Not quite there yet. Okay. It's not quite there yet.
But it will be. We know.
Will be. Yeah, we have a remarkable tenor singing Juan Diego. John Horton Murray is a Metropolitan Opera veteran. When you're in the business, you can access these people well enough. And John came in to do this, and he's a Helden tenor. He just got back from Vilnius in Lithuania, seeing Siegfried, Siegmund, and he came back and he got off the plane, went home, came into rehearsal, knew the opera cold. It's great to have, and it's a very good supporting cast as well.
A lot of great talent there when you can kind of pick it up and just learn it like that.
Makes Phil's life easier.
That's it. There you go. There you go. And I was reading as well some of the reviews of some previous performances. I think this premiered back a couple of years ago.
2008.
2008. And I was reading some of the reviews, and they were all just kind of been glowing about this particular work. So I know that we're in store for something really great coming up at Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Dominic Argento, a famous American composer, really thinks very highly of the work. I think in many ways the religious aspect of the work limits the audience appeal. But had he used a different libretto, this could have been a Pulitzer Prize nominated work. It is remarkably well composed. Thorny, but well composed.
Yeah. There you go. Well, Phil, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Once again, of course, the performance is coming up at Our Lady of Guadalupe Parish over on 15th Avenue here in Brooklyn, Friday night on December 3rd, this coming Friday night, 7:30, then again on Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock. Phil, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it very much. And we do have more information about the opera over on our website. Just head to currentsny.net. Click on our blog, Riding the Wave. And we'll also be attending a performance this weekend. We'll have a full report about that coming up next week. I mentioned Aaron Copland, by the way, earlier on in that interview. And if you've never heard an Aaron Copland score, it is very reminiscent of the music that you just heard there. A lot of thorny rhythms, as he was saying, a lot of very interesting rhythms and a lot of different sounds. So check it out if you can. You're in for something very, very interesting and, as we said, different, unique for the holiday. Well, that's it for tonight. Now, coming up tomorrow, how people around the world marked World AIDS Day. Plus, more of my interview with Father Fessio on Pope Benedict's new book. We'll talk about some other things that he talked about besides his statement on condoms there as well. Until next time, I'm Matt McClure. Thanks so much for joining us and watching here on Currents. Have a great night.